11 days. That is how long one of these men could survive without a paycheck. The other one could stop working tomorrow and be fine for 6 years. They earn the same salary within a few thousand of each other. They live on the same street. Their children are at the same school, and you could not tell them apart. Nothing in that driveway tells you which is which, not the cars, not the houses, not the clothes. If you watched them for a month, you would not be able to guess. They shop in the same places. They take the same kind of holidays. From the outside, they are the same man. And this is the part that should bother you. They don't know either. Neither of them has ever done the arithmetic. Both of them believe they are doing fine because both of them are measuring the same thing, how they appear, and by that measure they are identical. One of them is at wealth level 4. The other has been stuck at level 2 for 19 years and has no idea there are levels at all. So let's talk about the levels. There are 5 of them. Almost everyone you know is on the second one, and the reason they stay there is not that they don't earn enough. It's that level 2 is the only level that feels like arriving. Before the levels, we must fix a measurement problem, because if you measure wealth the way most people do, you will never be able to find yourself on this ladder. Ask someone how wealthy they are, and they will tell you what they earn. That is the default answer almost everywhere. Income is the number on the payslip. It arrives on a schedule. It is easy to compare, and it is the only financial fact most people can recall without checking. But income is a rate, not a quantity. It describes speed, not distance. A man earning $300,000 a year who spends $300,000 a year is traveling extremely fast in a circle. At the end of a decade, he has moved nowhere at all, and he has the receipts of a very expensive journey to prove it. The second answer people give is net worth. This is better. At least it is a quantity. But it is still the wrong shape, because net worth counts things you would have to destroy your life to access. The equity in the house you live in is not wealth in any usable sense. You cannot eat it. You cannot spend it without moving. It is a number that makes the spreadsheet look reassuring and does absolutely nothing for you on the day something goes wrong. So here is the measure this whole video runs on, and I want you to hold it in your head for the next 40 minutes, because every level is defined by it. Wealth is time. Specifically, how long could you maintain your life if the money stopped arriving tomorrow? Not how much you earn, not what the house is worth. How many days, weeks, months, or years of your ordinary life you already own outright, sitting there, already paid for. That is the ladder. Every level is a longer stretch of purchased time, and the reason it works as a measure is that it is almost impossible to fake. You can borrow a car, you can borrow a lifestyle, you can borrow for a surprisingly long time an entire identity. You cannot borrow 11 months of not needing to work. Here is the entire ladder, quickly, and then we will spend the rest of this video on it properly. Level 1 is dependence. You survive on the next payment. Money is oxygen. You think about it constantly, and only ever in the immediate term. Time owned, days. Level 2 is appearance. You now earn enough to look like you have escaped level 1, and you have spent almost exactly that much doing it. Time owned, still days, sometimes fewer than at level 1. This is where most people stop, and this is where we will spend the most time. Level 3 is buffer. You have margin. There is distance between you and the next disaster, and for the first time in your life, money has bought you something real. Time owned, months. Level 4 is independence. What you own produces enough to cover what your life costs. Work becomes a decision rather than a requirement. Time owned, years. Level 5 is indifference. Money stops being a subject, not because you have infinite amounts of it, but because you have stopped negotiating with it. Time owned, enough that you no longer count. Notice something about that list. The gap between level 1 and level 2 is enormous in income and almost zero in wealth. The gap between level 2 and level 3 requires no additional income at all. That second fact is the single most useful thing in this video, and almost nobody acts on it because level 2 does not feel like a trap. It feels like a reward. Level 1 is the honest level. That is the strange thing about it, and it is why we are not going to spend long here, not because it isn't painful, but because it isn't confusing. At level 1, you know exactly where you stand. There is no ambiguity, no self-deception, no story you are telling yourself. The money arrives, the money leaves, and the gap between those two events is where your entire life happens. You check the balance before you buy anything. You know the date of every direct debit by heart. You have a mental map of which bills can be late and by how many days before something is switched off. People who have never been here imagine it as a budgeting problem. It isn't. It's a bandwidth problem. When every financial decision is urgent, none of them can be strategic. You buy the cheap shoes that last 4 months instead of the good ones that last 4 years, not because you don't understand the arithmetic, you understand it perfectly, but because you cannot access the arithmetic. The good shoes require money you do not have on the day you need shoes, so you pay more over time for being poor. This is the mechanism, and it is not a character flaw. It is a compounding penalty applied to people with the least capacity to absorb it. Epictetus, who spent the first part of his life as a slave in Rome, made a distinction that lands hard here. He divided the world into what is up to us and what is not. Level 1 is the level where that distinction is most brutally clear, because at level 1, almost nothing about your material circumstances is up to you, and the only thing you have any authority over is what you do with the next hour. And that is the honest answer about level 1. The way out is not a mindset, it is income. There is no philosophical solution to not having enough money to live on, and anyone who tells you otherwise is selling something. If you are at level 1, the only lever that matters is the size of the gap between what arrives and what leaves, and the fastest way to widen that gap is usually the boring one: earn more in whatever way is available to you, and do not let your life expand while you do it. Which brings us to the moment where almost everyone goes wrong, because the gap does eventually widen. For most people, it does. The promotion arrives, or the second income, or the years of experience finally price themselves properly. Suddenly, there is more coming in than going out, and for the first time, you have a genuine choice about what to do with the difference. And here is what happens almost universally. Within about 90 days, the difference is gone and you cannot quite account for where. You did not make one large decision. That is what makes it so hard to see. Nobody gets a raise and buys a boat. You made about 40 small ones, each of which was completely reasonable on its own. The slightly better flat, the car that doesn't need fixing, the food shop where you no longer check the prices, the flights you booked without waiting for a sale. Every single one of those was an improvement. Every single one of them was, in isolation, obviously correct. And collectively, they consumed the entire raise before it arrived and moved you exactly one level up the ladder into the level that isn't really a level at all. Level 2 is where most people reading about wealth actually are, and it is the most psychologically complicated place on the ladder, because level 2 is the only level that feels like an achievement while being, in strict financial terms, almost identical to the one below it. Here is the definition. At level 2, your income has risen and your expenses have risen to match it, and the specific thing your money has purchased is the appearance of having left level 1. You look solvent, you look comfortable, you look, to everyone who knows you, like someone who has worked it out. And if the income stopped tomorrow, you would have somewhere between 2 weeks and 2 months. In many cases, less time than you had at level 1. Because at level 1, your obligations were small. At level 2, you have acquired a set of fixed monthly commitments, the car, the larger rent or mortgage, the subscriptions, the school, the standard of living your children now consider normal, that cannot be reduced quickly and cannot be reduced quietly. Level 1 is cheap to sustain and miserable. Level 2 is expensive to sustain and comfortable. The vulnerability is roughly the same. The difference is that at level 1 you knew why this happens and why it is not stupidity. I want to be careful here because the standard treatment of this subject is contemptuous, and contempt is both unkind and analytically useless. People do not arrive at level 2 because they are foolish. They arrive there because of 3 forces that are extremely difficult to see while they are acting on you. The first is that spending is legible and saving is invisible. If you spend 40,000 on a car, everyone you know finds out within a week without you saying a word. If you put 40,000 into an index fund, nobody will ever know unless you tell them. And if you tell them, it sounds like boasting, so you don't, which means every visible signal in your social environment is a spending signal. You are surrounded constantly by evidence of other people's consumption and by no evidence whatsoever of their savings. Your sense of what is normal is built entirely from one half of the data. Thorstein Veblen described this in 1899 and gave it a name that has never been improved on: conspicuous consumption. His observation was that beyond a certain point, purchases are not made for use, they are made to be seen, and the crucial part, the part that makes it a trap rather than a choice, is that the signal only works if it is expensive. A thing that everyone can afford communicates nothing. So the cost is not a side effect of the signal. The cost is the signal, which means there is no efficient version. You cannot get the same social result for less money because the money is the message. This is why the ladder of appearance has no top. Whatever you buy, it can be exceeded. And the people who exceed it are the ones you will now be compared against. The second force is that your reference group changes without your permission. When your income rises, you do not simply have more money, you move. You move into a different neighborhood, a different office, a different set of parents at the school gate, a different tier of the same social world, and every one of those environments has a baseline, an unspoken standard of what a normal person here drives, wears, eats, and does in August. Nobody tells you what the baseline is. You absorb it, and within a few months, meeting it stops feeling like spending and starts feeling like maintenance. You are not indulging, you are keeping up. Those feel completely different from the inside, and they cost the same. This is why the raise disappears, not because you became greedy, but because you were promoted into a more expensive normal, and normal is not something most people consciously choose. It is something they arrive at inside. The third force is the one people find hardest to accept, which is that the satisfaction from any of it has a half-life of about 3 months. This is well documented, and it is called hedonic adaptation. You adapt to improvements in your circumstances far faster and far more completely than you expect to. The new car is thrilling for a fortnight, pleasant for a month, and by the end of the quarter it is simply the car. It has not made you unhappy. It has done something more expensive than that. It has become your new baseline, so that returning to the old car would now register as a loss. That is the actual transaction at level 2. Each upgrade delivers a few weeks of pleasure and then permanently raises the cost of feeling normal. You have not purchased satisfaction. You have purchased a higher floor, and you now have to keep paying for that floor every month for the rest of your life, in exchange for a feeling that expired in the spring. The fourth force, the people you chose. There is a fourth force, and it is the one people resist hardest because it does not feel like a financial force at all. It feels like friendship. Your closest friends are, in strictly financial terms, one of the largest line items in your life, and you have almost certainly never counted them, not because they ask you for money, because they set the price of participation. Every friendship group has a default restaurant, a default kind of holiday, a default response to someone's birthday, a default assumption about whether you split the bill evenly or pay for what you ordered. Nobody voted on any of it. It emerged, usually from whoever in the group had the most money or the least caution, and once it exists, it is almost impossible to change, because changing it requires someone to say out loud that they cannot afford it. And nobody says that, not once. In an entire adult lifetime, most people never say that sentence to a friend, even when it is true, even when saying it would cost them nothing but a moment of discomfort. So instead, they pay. Quietly, repeatedly, for years, for a standard of socializing that was set by the wealthiest person at the table and is now the price of belonging. Run the arithmetic just once. A dinner that costs 80 rather than 30 twice a month. A weekend away that costs 600 rather than 200 3 times a year. A round of drinks you did not want at the end of an evening you were ready to leave. None of these are extravagant on the day. Together they are somewhere between 3,000 and 6,000 a year, every year, indefinitely, and at the 25 times multiple we will get to shortly. That single social default has moved your independence date by something in the region of 100,000. I am not going to tell you to get new friends. That is the advice this subject usually attracts, and it is both cold and useless, because the friendships are frequently worth more than the money, and you know it. What I will say is this: there is a difference between choosing to spend 6,000 a year on the people you love and never having noticed that you were. The first is a decision, and a defensible one, arguably one of the better uses of money there is. The second is a subscription you did not sign up for, renewing automatically on terms set by somebody else. The work is not to spend less on your friends. The work is to know the number and then to decide deliberately whether you want to keep paying it. Most people at level 2 have never done the first half, which means they have never had the chance to do the second. The test. So how do you know whether you are at level 2? Not by how you feel, because level 2 feels fine. That is its defining property. You need a test that does not consult your feelings. Here it is, and it takes about 4 minutes. 1. Add up everything you could access within 7 days without borrowing and without selling anything you live in or drive to work. Cash, savings, anything liquid. That is your number. 2. Add up what your life costs to run for 1 month. Not what you think it costs, what it actually cost last month, including the things you would describe as unusual, because there is something unusual every month, and that is what makes it usual. 3. Divide the first by the second. Under 1 month, you are at level 1 or 2, and which one depends only on how good you look while you're there. 1 to 6 months, you are entering level 3. 6 months to a few years, you are solidly at level 3 and building. Enough that the number stops being a countdown. You are approaching level 4. Most people do this calculation and are genuinely surprised. Not because the number is catastrophic, usually it isn't, but because they have never once looked at it, despite having looked at their income figure roughly 4,000 times. And the surprise itself is the diagnosis. If you did not know the number, you were not managing it. You were managing an appearance, and the appearance was managing you. The way out is smaller than you think. Here is the good news, and it is genuinely. Getting from level 1 to level 2 requires more income. There is no way around that. But getting from level 2 to level 3 requires no additional income at all. It requires you to stop converting income into obligations. That is the whole move. You do not have to sell the car or move house or perform any dramatic act of renunciation. You have to stop the next expansion, the next raise, the next bonus, the next time a car loan finally ends. That money does not enter your life. It goes somewhere it cannot be seen, and critically, it goes there before you ever experience having it. Because the thing about level 2 is that it is not built on decisions. It is built on defaults. Money that arrives in the account gets spent. Money that never arrives in the account does not. That is not willpower. That is plumbing. And people at level 2 do not have a willpower problem. They have a plumbing problem, and they keep trying to solve it with discipline, which is why they keep failing. Seneca, who was one of the richest men in the Roman Empire, which is exactly what makes him worth listening to on this, wrote to his friend Lucilius that it is not the man who has too little who is poor, but the man who craves more. It reads like a platitude until you notice what he is actually describing. He is describing a level. He is saying that poverty is not a quantity of money, but a relationship to it, and that a man with 300 million sesterces who needs 301 is functionally at level 1, no matter what the ledger says. He was not being modest, he was being technical. Level 3 is the first level where money does something for you rather than something about you. The definition is simple. You have somewhere between 6 months and a few years of your life already paid for. It is liquid, it is boring, it earns very little, and it sits there doing nothing, which is precisely its function. People underestimate what happens here because they imagine level 3 as a slightly larger version of level 2. It isn't. Something changes in kind, not degree, and it changes almost immediately. What buffers buys? The first thing it buys is the ability to say no. This sounds small, it is enormous. At levels 1 and 2, you cannot afford to leave a job, refuse a client, decline a project, or push back in a meeting because the cost of being wrong is immediate and the cost of being right is theoretical. So, you agree. You agree constantly to things you know are wrong, in rooms where your agreement is worth nothing because everyone knows you had no alternative. At level 3, your agreement starts to mean something because it could have been refusal, and people notice this before you tell them anything. There is a particular quality to someone who does not need the outcome of a conversation, and it cannot be faked, and it is worth more professionally than almost any skill you could acquire in the same period. The second thing it buys is the removal of urgency from decisions. Every financial decision made under time pressure is worse than the same decision made with a month to consider it. Buffer converts urgent decisions into ordinary ones. The boiler fails. At level 2, that is a crisis that generates a bad, expensive, fast decision. At level 3, it is an errand. The third thing, and this is the one nobody mentions, is that it changes the quality of your attention. Money you might need next week occupies part of your mind permanently, whether or not you are thinking about it. It runs in the background, and it consumes capacity you would otherwise use for work, for the people you live with, or for thinking about anything at all. Buffer shuts that process down. People arriving at level 3 consistently report the same thing, and it is never about the money. They say the noise stopped. Why almost nobody builds it? And yet most people at level 2 never build a buffer despite having the income to do it, and the reason is instructive. Buffer is invisible. It cannot be shown to anyone. It generates no compliments, no status, and no experiences. It sits in an account being ignored, and every month you look at it, there is a voice suggesting that it is doing nothing and could be doing something. That voice is the level 2 voice, and it is wrong because it is measuring the wrong thing. Buffer's return is not financial, its return is optionality, and optionality does not appear on any statement. There is also a second obstacle, which is that a buffer only works if you refuse to spend it on things that are not emergencies. And here is the difficulty. At level 2, everything feels like an emergency, because there is no distinction between a genuine crisis and an ordinary expense you failed to anticipate. Building buffer requires you to learn a distinction you have never needed before, and to hold that line while the account sits there, visible, adequate, and quietly available. Musonius Rufus, the most practical of the Stoics and the one almost nobody reads, taught his students to deliberately practice going without things they could easily afford, not as self-punishment and not as an aesthetic, as a test. He argued that if you have never voluntarily done without something, you do not know whether you want it or whether you merely have it, and you will not find out at a convenient moment. That is the actual work of level 3, not earning more, discovering which of your expenses are yours and which ones you inherited from a neighborhood. Level 4 is the one everybody has heard of, usually under a different name, and it is the most misunderstood level on the ladder, not because people misunderstand the arithmetic, but because they misunderstand what it feels like to arrive. The definition, what you own, produces enough income to cover what your life costs. Work becomes something you choose rather than something you owe. Notice that this is a ratio between two numbers and that people obsess over one of them and almost entirely ignore the other. Everyone focuses on the assets. How much do I need? What return can I assume? How many years will it take? These are real questions, and they have real answers. But the denominator, what your life costs, is the number you have far more control over, and it is the one that moves the target. Here is the uncomfortable arithmetic. Every increase in your annual cost of living does not just cost you that amount. It raises the size of the asset base you need in order to be free permanently by roughly 25 times that amount. An extra $500 a month spent every month moves the finish line by about 150,000. This is why level 2 is not merely a stationary place. It is actively hostile to level 4. Every upgrade you make at level 2 does not just fail to advance you, it moves the destination further away at a multiple for as long as you keep paying for it. Which means the two people in that driveway at the start of this video were not simply saving at different rates. They were aiming at different targets. One of them was chasing a finish line that retreated every time he approached it. The other had spent 19 years holding his target still, which is a far less impressive achievement to describe and a vastly more effective one to perform. The driveway, with the numbers in. Let me put actual figures on those two men, because the abstraction hides how ordinary the difference is. Both earn $90,000 a year. Both have earned roughly that, adjusted, for 19 years. Neither inherited anything. Neither had a windfall, a business exit, or a stroke of luck. This is important. There is no hidden advantage in this story, which is what makes it uncomfortable. The first man's life costs $84,000 a year to run. He saves 6. Some years he saves nothing, because some years there is a wedding, or a boiler, or a car. Call it $4,000 a year on average across 19 years. He has, before growth, $76,000, most of it in a pension he cannot touch, and about 11 days of liquid cash in the account. The second man's life costs $60,000. Not 60 because he suffers, 60 because his social defaults settled 20% lower. His house is the one he bought at 34, rather than the one he upgraded to at 41, and he has driven 3 cars in 19 years rather than 7. He saves $30,000 a year, over 19 years, with ordinary market growth and no cleverness whatsoever. He is somewhere around 1.1 million. And now apply the denominator. The first man needs 25 times 84,000 to be free, 2.1 million. The second needs 25 times 60, 1.5. So the first man has less and needs more, And the gap between them is not the gap in their savings. It is that gap multiplied, compounded, and then measured against two different finish lines. 24,000 a year of lifestyle. That is the entire difference. 2,000 a month, spent rather than kept, on a set of upgrades that neither of them could describe to you now, that produced a few weeks of pleasure each, and that nobody standing in that driveway can see. What level 4 is not? Level 4 is not retirement, and the confusion between the two ruins it for a lot of people who get there. Most people who reach genuine independence keep working, not because they miscalculated, but because the thing they wanted was never the absence of work, it was the absence of compulsion. Those are different, and if you spend 15 years believing you are working towards the first when you actually want the second, you will arrive and feel nothing, which is one of the more demoralizing experiences available. The other thing level 4 is not safe from is the mechanism that got you stuck at level 2. You can be at level 4 and still be at level 2. It is common. You have the assets, the cover ratio works, and you have also acquired a set of expectations, comparisons, and obligations that scale with your capital so that you experience no more freedom than you did at half the amount. The number went up. The relationship did not change. You are now comparing yourself to a wealthier set of people and losing, which is exactly what you were doing at level 2 in a better postcode. This is the point at which the ladder stops being about money at all, and it is why there is a fifth level. Level 5 is the hardest to describe and the easiest to recognize when you meet it. It is not a quantity. There is no number that puts you here. It is a state in which money has stopped being a subject, where you are no longer negotiating with it, defending against it, or measuring yourself with it. The Stoics called this the correct relationship to what they termed indifferent. Their argument was subtle, and it is almost always reported badly. They did not say money was worthless. They said it was preferred, but not good, meaning that a reasonable person would rather have it than not, would take sensible steps to acquire it, and would not organize a life around it or allow their assessment of themselves to depend on it. That distinction is the whole of level 5. It is not detachment, and it is not asceticism. Seneca kept his fortune. Marcus Aurelius ran an empire and controlled its treasury. Neither of them was pretending money did not matter. They were making a much narrower claim that money is an instrument, that instruments are judged by what they produce, and that a man who has made himself into an instrument of his instrument has got the relationship backwards. Here is the practical version. At level 5, a financial loss is a problem to be solved rather than a verdict on who you are. A colleague earning more than you is a fact about them rather than a fact about you. A purchase is either useful or not useful, and the question of what it says about you does not arise because you are no longer running that calculation, not because you have suppressed it, but because it has genuinely stopped occurring to you. And this is why it cannot be bought, and why some people at level 3 have it, while people at level 4 do not. The ladder we have been climbing measures purchase time. Level 5 measures something else entirely, and it is the only level you can reach out of order. It is also, and I want to be honest about this, the only level I cannot give you a method for. Levels 1 to 4 have mechanisms. Earn more, stop expanding, build buffer, hold the denominator still. Level 5 has no mechanism because it is not a thing you do. It is a thing that happens as a side effect of doing the other 4 honestly for long enough while paying attention. What I can tell you is what it is not. It is not the thing you will feel when you hit the number. Everyone at level 2 believes there is a figure that will produce it, and that when they reach that figure, the relationship will change on its own. It does not. Nobody has ever arrived at a number and felt differently about money because the number was never what was generating the feeling. So, 2 men in a driveway, indistinguishable, one of them 19 years into a level he does not know he is on. Here is what I would ask you to do, and it is one thing, not 5. Divide everything you could access in 7 days, divided by what 1 month of your life actually costs. That is the only number on this ladder that cannot be argued with, and it takes about 4 minutes, and almost nobody who watches a video like this ever does it. If the answer is under 1, you now know something you did not know this morning, and you know it before it becomes urgent, which is the only useful time to know it. And if you have been at level 2 for a while, if you recognized yourself somewhere around minute 14 and it was not comfortable, I want to say the thing that I think is actually true, which is that level 2 is not a failure of character. It is what happens to a reasonable person in an environment that only shows them half the evidence. You were never given the other half. You have been comparing yourself for your entire adult life against people whose finances you cannot see, using the only signals available to you, which are precisely the signals designed to be misleading. The move out of it is not dramatic. It is not renunciation, and it is not a system. It is one decision made once and then not revisited. The next increase does not enter your life. That is it. That is the whole distance between level 2 and level 3, and it is why the man in the driveway with 6 years of freedom does not look any different to the man with 11 days. He never bought anything you could see. The next video in this series is level 3 in full, exactly how much buffer, where to hold it, and the 4 rules for not spending it. If that is the one you need, subscribe and it will find you. And if you want to know what this looks like inside a relationship where 2 people are on different levels and neither of them has ever said so out loud, that video is on screen now. It is the one people tell me they wish they had watched 5 years earlier.